The year was 1640, and the square of Paris smelled of rain-soaked iron, fresh mud, and the slow rot of old blood. The man who knelt in its center was not noble, but he had ruled over pain like a king over his dominion. Jean-Baptiste Louvet, executioner turned criminal, once the master of the wheel, was now about to be broken upon it. The crown could not publicly admit that the city's official executioner had committed such a heinous crime, but neither could they bury it without scandal. The second crushed his right forearm. Blood sprayed in a perfect arc, a crimson halo that decorated the hood of the nearest priest. Louvet's crimes were inflated, his victims romanticized, his final hours mythologized. Some claimed he laughed as his bones were broken, others that he died cursing the crowd. But one truth remained unshaken: his death marked the end of an era. And now, please stop the video and subscribe to our channel. To be able to keep making videos like this, we need to reach 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Thank you. The monarchy, increasingly nervous about its image, began to reform the use of public torture. The wheel fell into disuse. Executions moved indoors, behind prison walls. Spectacle gave way to silence. But the memory lingered. In whispered conversations, in children's rhymes, in the folk songs of taverns where wine flowed like blood. Louvet was called the King of Pain. His name became a warning, not against cruelty, but against reveling in it. And as we peer backward through the mists of time, what remains most haunting is not the blood, nor the breaking, nor even the screams, but the ease with which a man of flesh became a machine of death, and then again became flesh beneath the same machine. The wheel turns, always, and as history reminds us, those who spin it often find themselves beneath it. Each strike was measured, not swift, not hasty, but deliberate. His limbs were broken in the order prescribed by old law: legs, arms, hips, shoulders. With each crack, the crowd surged, mouths agape, some wincing, others weeping, many cheering. When his body had been sufficiently mangled, he was woven into the spokes of the wheel, his shattered bones bent backwards, tied into grotesque shapes. Then he was raised up, the wheel mounted vertically, so that his broken frame turned slowly with the breeze. For hours, he hung like that half-conscious, groaning. Carrion birds circled above, sensing the nearing end. By dusk, he had ceased to move, but the law required a final mercy. The coup de grace, a hammer blow to the chest or head, was withheld until nightfall. When it finally came, it was not mercy. It was punctuation. The priest who delivered it did so with a trembling hand, whispering Latin that even God may have turned away from. His ribs caved like eggshells. Silence, then applause. It was over. So instead, they elevated it. They dressed it in grandeur. They made Louvet the protagonist in a play of judicial penance. His victims, or at least their families, were given front row seats. The same officials who had once nodded approvingly at his clean cuts and dramatic flair now condemned him as a butcher of men, drunk on agony. The decision to sentence him to the breaking wheel was not mere irony. It was calculated, a message. Paris would not be governed by monsters who believed themselves gods, and so the preparations began. The scaffold was raised higher than usual, visible from the cathedral steps. The wheel itself, polished and reinforced, was said to be the same one he had used a decade prior to break a child thief whose name had already faded from memory. Executioners from Bordeaux, Lyon, and Marseille were summoned, none trusted to act alone. For days before his execution, Louvet was kept in solitary confinement, gagged to prevent him from preaching to the guards. It was said he wept not from fear, but frustration. Denied his final performance. The wheel's king was rendered mute. When the morning of his death arrived, Paris turned out in droves. Mothers brought their children. Peddlers sold meat pies beside monks offering blessings. It was not a punishment. It was a pilgrimage. And when Louvet was dragged to the platform, naked but for a shift, The silence that fell was almost reverent. What kind of world births a man who becomes both the inflictor and the victim of unspeakable agony? What turns a servant of justice into its most monstrous parody? And what happens when the blade of state punishment turns back on the one who wielded it with such ferocious pride? This is the tale of the Wheel's King crowned by blood, dethroned by vengeance, immortalized in torment. Jean-Baptiste Louvet was born to a butcher's son in the outer arrondissements of Paris. In a world where the boundaries between survival, profession, and cruelty were often blurred beyond recognition. He was reared in a district where life was taken with the same casual rhythm as bread was broken. His father, hardened by years of carving flesh, both animal and otherwise, understood early that Jean-Baptiste had a stomach for more than meat. Apprenticed at 13 to the city's executioner, Louvet was quick to understand the rituals of death, only the mechanics, but the art of spectacle. By 20, he had inherited the post after a convenient accident claimed his predecessor's head beneath a faulty axe. In Louvet's hands, executions became theater. But they were not just theater. They were laboratories of pain, and Louvet was their chief scientist. The breaking wheel in archaic but highly visible punishment became his signature. With a sense of showmanship that rivaled that of Rome's Colosseum, Louvet turned each public breaking into a grotesque symphony of snapping limbs and drawn-out gasps. Criminals were lashed to the wheel, their arms and legs shattered with iron cudgels. Their bodies rotated for the audience like grotesque marionettes. He was said to whisper in their ears as he worked. Some claimed prayers, others said it was poetry. Few said he asked forgiveness. He executed over 100 men and women across his 20-year tenure. Not one of them was shown mercy. Over time, even the parliament began to look askance at his conduct. There were whispers that some of the condemned were not condemned at all, that Louvet paid bribes to hasten the arrival of justice, and in doing so, sustained the appetite of the crowd that fed his ego. But it was not this that ended his reign. It was a death far too private, far too scandalous, and far too political. One spring night, a visiting Bavarian diplomat was found strangled in a brothel near Montmartre. Witnesses described a man with a limp, with hands strong enough to crack stone, who smelled of blood and lye. Louvet, famously lame from an early fracture, was arrested within the week. The trial was brief but agonizing in its exposure. The first blow shattered his left femur. A sound like wet timber split across the cobbles, followed by a scream that did not seem human. In the weeks that followed, pamphlets depicting the execution circulated across France.